Hello and welcome to the Podcast Podcast, where we answer your questions about personal injury cases. I'm attorney Rusty Messer coming to you from my office in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and we have with us our client support specialist, Maria, who is co-hosting today. Maria, what user submitted question are we answering today?
Hey everybody, today we'll be answering how to calculate a lost wage claim in a personal injury case.
Maria, that's a really common question. I get asked that a lot. There are really four types of lost wage claims. So the first type is you've been injured and you can't immediately go back to work. Maybe your back hurts, maybe your leg hurts or whatever. So you're going to take a few days off. That's the first type of lost wage claim, and it's what I refer to as like a recovery claim. You've been injured, you need a little bit of time to recover. As soon as you get better, you're going to be back at it. The second type of lost wage claim is you were hurt and it wasn't bad enough to keep you from going back to work, but you keep having to take off of work to go to the doctor, to go to therapy, to go to things like that. That is also recoverable along with your mileage. So you can also recover for all the time driving, the mileage that you spent going to those appointments. The third type of lost wage claim is more a long-term lost wage claim where you were hurt and your injuries were serious and you're never going to be able to go back to work. So that's what we call a future lost wage claim. So the fourth type is also a future lost wage claim, but you weren't hurt so bad that you're never going to be able to go back to work, but you can't go back to work and do what you used to do. So let's say before your accident, you were working in a refinery, right? Really tough manual labor. And maybe you were making $25 or $30 an hour. Now, because of your injuries, you can still work, but you can't go back and do that. So you may need some retraining and you may have uh, only the ability to go back to work, say making $15 or $20 an hour. So it's not really a loss of employment, but it is a loss in the difference of what you were going to make and what you can now make. So for any of these things, the first thing you're going to have to do is establish what you were making before the accident. So the type of proof we have here are normally wage records, pay stubs, tax returns, a lot of times letters from an employer. A lot of times we'll get people who come to us and they're self-employed. And uh, maybe this has to be calculated based on that maybe they don't draw a regular paycheck, but they are able to go back and say, well, this is on average what I was paying myself over a week. So that's how we're going to prove for the amount of what you were making before the accident. Now, for any of these, you need to know it's not going to be enough to say, well, look, I think I'm hurt and I don't feel I can go to work, so I'm not going back. It's definitely not going to be enough to say, well, I think I'm hurt really bad and I'm never going back to work. You're going to need a doctor saying that you're unable to do either all of your job or some part of your job. Sometimes it's as simple as a doctor saying you need to take 3 days off to recover. Sometimes it's a doctor saying, well, you can go back to work, but you can't lift more than 10 pounds. And again, that could be for a temporary or it could be long term. When we get into long term lost wage claims, these are usually going to involve some different types of specialists or experts. One type that we commonly have is something called a vocational rehabilitation expert. So this is somebody that looks at your medical records, looks at the type of work that you used to do, looks at the type of work that's available to you, and talks about why the work you're going to be able to do after your accident is not going to pay you as well as the work that you were doing before. Uh, Another type of expert that we might have is an economist because the vocational rehabilitation expert can talk about the the income that you're going to lose, but an economist can really put that into perspective about what you would have made over time, the value of that extra money in inflation. You got promotions coming, you got increased cost coming. That's where an economist comes in. It's going to cost more to live. And the third type that we would use in some cases are what we call a life care planner. Let's say that you were seriously injured and you're going to need long-term medical treatment. What is the cost of that treatment going to be? That's where a life care planner might come in and say, we think you're going to need this kind of care. So this goes to your future medicals. This is And so that has to be factored in. It's not maybe directly a wage claim, but it is a future claim that we have to consider. So for the first thing we have to do is determine which one or more of these lost wage claims you're going to be bringing. And you may not know, right? It may be earlier in your case and you don't know how bad you're hurt. You don't know if you're going to be able to go back to work. So that still may be unresolved. Once that's determined, we need to start thinking about what kind of evidence you need to prove that. What kind of wage records, what doctor's notes, uh, evaluations by specialists. Then we need to start putting a number to that. On these records, once we've gotten those opinions from the experts, you're going to need to put a number on the amount of your wage claim. So you can't just go in and say it. It's going to take some proof, but it's definitely something that can be established.
One question that we usually get from clients is what kind of medical evidence is the most persuasive when proving a lost wage claim?
So it's a good question because a lot of times when you're making the lost wage claim, especially pre-suit, like there's been no lawsuit filed and you're not in front of a jury, so you really just have an adjuster reading some records. It needs to say in those medical records what type of injuries you have, what type of pain you're experiencing, and it needs to say a recommendation from a doctor. I recommend this person not go back to work for 3 days or 5 days or 2 months or whatever. I recommend this person is going to need this type of surgery. Sometimes doctors will do what's called a disability rating or a partial disability rating. The best evidence is going to come out of your medical records to establish that you can't go back to work, at least the best initial records.
How do insurance companies try to dispute or minimize the lost wage claims?
Right. So one of the biggest tactics that the insurance company will use is right after your claim, they will have someone come follow you around and try to get video of you doing things that you're claiming you can't do. Uh, I've had clients where they've had video of them cutting their grass. Well, the guy never said he couldn't cut his grass. One time, they sent me a very long video of a woman walking through the store, putting groceries in her car, bringing them home, putting them up, and they thought they really had something, but they taped the wrong person. I didn't even know who this person was. It wasn't my client. But they will definitely use these sneaky tactics to try to catch you, in a store picking something up off of a top shelf. Once we get past that, then they're going to start arguing that you're not really as hurt as you say you are. Just like you should be getting experts on your own side, the vocational rehabilitation specialist, a doctor. They're going to try to get their own experts to come in and maybe a doctor to look at your medical records or examine you and say, that doctor doesn't think you really hurt that bad. They're going to get somebody to come in and say, oh, well, look, you can do all these other jobs, and they're going to want to overlook the fact that those jobs don't pay that well, or those jobs may not be available to you. If you were a truck driver and they're going to come in and argue that you can now go be a computer programmer, well, that's probably not going to happen, at least not without a lot of retraining.
How do age and career trajectory impact the calculation of future lost wages?
It's a very good question. So obviously, if you still have 40 years left in your working career and you're unable to go back to work, or you're going to make $5,000 less per year because of your injuries, that's just going to be multiplied out over that time that you would have had to work. Now, conversely, when we get people who are older in their career, they were usually at the higher end of their wage earning days. They were making more money. So maybe they only had another 5 to 10 years left that they were going to work, but those were some really high earning years for them based off of what they were making before the crash.
If a case goes to trial, how do you present a lost wages claim effectively to the jury?
One of the most impactful things you can do in any injury case is to help the jury fully understand how the injuries are affecting your life. So I never recommend starting off with the medical bills, starting off with the wage claims. All that has to come in. But before you get to any of that, the jury has to understand how these injuries are affecting you. Once the jury understands why it hurts to get up and go to work every day, why it hurts to get up and do this task or that task every day, then you start tacking the numbers to that. Then you start saying, well, look, Miss Johnson was making $60,000 a year, but now because she can't sit in front of a computer for 8 hours a day and do her job as an accountant. She's limited in what she can do. Maybe she can only work part-time. So it's really about, first of all, establishing what the injuries are, helping the jury fully understand that. Once they understand that, you got to put hard numbers to that. Nobody's giving away money for pie on the sky. Hey, I'm hurt and I need a bunch of money. You have to put hard numbers to it, and you do that with getting the evidence of what you made before, good, solid expert testimony about the value of your loss or the decrease in what your wages are going to be. That's what I believe juries really like to see. It's not that juries don't want to pay you for your lost wages. I believe they do once they fully understand how the accident has affected you and what it's really going to cost you going forward.
And Rusty, what advice would you give to someone who is currently injured and wants to make sure they document their lost wages properly?
The first thing I would do is make sure that you're collecting your income records, make sure you're keeping your tax returns, you have those ready. Make sure that your doctor is putting into your notes, that you're telling your doctor about the activities that your injuries are keeping you from doing, so that your doctor is getting that into the record so that it is well documented. Not only because so that it's well documented, because people tend to forget things, right? So if your doctor is at trial 3 years after your injury, he or she may not remember about how bad it was hurting you that day when you saw her, right? Him or her. But if it's documented in the records, the doctor's going to read that records, and then the doctor's going to remember, oh yeah, I remember right when Miss Johnson came in, she was complaining that she was having trouble walking. She was having trouble lifting things with her left arm, whatever it is. So documentation is key. Thank you once again for joining us here on Podcast, where we answer your questions about injury cases. If you have questions, please submit them to us either in the chat or email them to us. Remember, if you're doing it in the chat, do not include personal or sensitive information. Remember to like and subscribe, and we will see you next week.